human nature is very complicated, but I think, those who feel that their priorities are in order, those who feel in integrity, those who feel connected to themselves at the deepest level are going to have fortitude. And sometimes circumstances bring that out often within people. And so people really start to understand, oh, what am I made of? What's my character? How am I built? And I think we've seen a lot of that over the past few years. How do I treat people? So I think we'll see continued unfolding around that, shall we say.
Okay, so one of the challenges I hear from you guys the most is how hard it is to drop into meditation or even to relax and just feel calm. And I speak a lot here about how our bodies have not evolved to manage the level of stress we're faced with today, which means we're constantly in fight or flight mode with our sympathetic nervous systems always activated, which we know leads to depression and anxiety and also chronic health problems. If we want to be well, we have to find ways to mitigate this. We have to do that ourselves. And I believe in merging natural daily practices with the kind of health tech that enables us to counter and mitigate the challenges that modern life throws at us. And the Sensate is one of those products, and I want to tell you about it. So the Sensate is a small palm-sized device that sends infrasonic waves through the chest in order to activate the vagus nerve and calm the autonomic nervous system, which is the body's command center. Together with the specially composed hemispheric audio within the app, you will literally feel calmer after only a short session. I give this to anyone I'm with if I have it on me, which I usually do, and everyone has the same response. It's amazing, and I already feel less stressed, and where can I get one? Now, I'm particularly recommending the Sensate to anyone who suffers from anxiety and wants to help calm the nervous system, those who want to deepen their meditation practice, and people who are looking for ways to be calmer and more grounded. Now, most of you know I work with a shaman, and he has taught me that our higher intelligence places ideas of health technology in the minds of those who can create and invent these products. And I truly believe this to be the case with things like the Aura Ring, the Somavedic, even diagnostic devices in hospital. And for me, I believe that to be true with the Sensate. We have lived for too long in a high stress state. We need more to help us counter that. So you can get £20 off the Sensate by visiting getsensate.com. That's GETSENSATE.com and using the code Lauren20. That's getsensate.com and the code Lauren20. Thank you to Sensate for partnering with Reconditioned. And now back to the episode. Welcome back to Reconditioned with me, Lauren Vaknin, and I am just in love with this episode I just recorded with Danielle Beinstein. It's just, wow, I've just come off of it. I'm just sitting here kind of processing and thinking about all the incredible things we spoke about. So the intention for the episode was to talk about astrological projections, as Dani is a psychological astrologer. So I brought her on to tell us all the things we can expect for 2023 in terms of astrological shifts, what we need to be looking out for, what we need to be prepared for. And she gave us that, but it also went so much deeper. So every time we spoke about a specific shift that might be happening, we kind of then, which I hadn't anticipated, but it was so beautiful, we really kind of opened that up and cracked it open to speak about each of those specific topics and what they meant and what it will mean for us going into 2023 and our own experiences of it. It was just such a rich episode that I'm so excited for you to hear, kind of coming towards the end of the year now. And then at the end, so you make sure to hang around till the end, because at the end we spoke about how the astrological shifts impact manifestation. And do they impact manifestation? Are our manifestations impacted at all by changes in astrology? So that was really expansive as well. Obviously, I have interviewed Dani before. We've spoken about other stuff before on the podcast, so just look that up and have a look for her. So I don't read her bio out in this. As you know, I usually read out guests' bios at the beginning, but we've done this before, so we didn't feel the need for it. We dove straight in and started speaking about, just all the great things we've spoken about. So make sure to listen to the end up until the end when we speak about manifestation stuff. And also her All About You rapid fire segment is great as well. I just love Dani. She and I get on so well. We have so much in common. And she's also a very expansive person for me to have in my life, because the way she sees things, I've kind of never, the very few people I've ever met that have a very just authentic ability to assess situations very differently to how most people do, and assess them from a point of a kind of a non-binary approach, just all the nuance that is involved in life. And she always looks at things differently, and she might say something to me and I'll go, oh, I didn't think about it like that. Thank you for giving me that perspective and inspiring me to open my mind to new perspectives as well. I think that's such an important gift, an important trait in us, and it leads us to be in integrity more, I believe. So I so appreciate that in Dani, and it's just a trait that we kind of all need to adopt a bit more, I think. It was generally just a great episode, very, very rich in everything we spoke about, and I'm looking forward to you hearing all of it. So this will be the penultimate episode of the season. We've got one more after this, and then we take a short little break, a few weeks for Christmas and New Year, and then I'll be back in second week of Jan with an incredible new season. When I say some guests that you will be wowed by and will not want to miss, I really, really mean it. And also some great Rise episodes that I have created for you based on all the topics I know you want to be speaking about. So yeah, make sure to be tuning back in the new year. And if you're not already, make sure you're subscribed to the podcast or following the podcast, so you get those updates when a new episode drops. And obviously it also helps to rank the podcast higher, which means that more people find it. So it's like a paying it forward by following or subscribing. And also, of course, if you want to rate or review, that always really helps. So thank you for being here and listening to this, hopefully to give yourself some expansion as you head into the new year, to prepare you for what you might expect based on astrology and everything else. As always, thank you for taking time for your own growth and your own well-being. So thank you for being here, and let us hear this episode with Danielle Beinstein. Dani, welcome back to Reconditioned.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so happy to have you back. So we've done your bio in our previous episode, so we're not gonna do that today because people know you anyway. And even though we've done this before, I always start the episode by asking, what have you done so far today to support your wellness?
Well, today is a bit interesting because we were up all night with my puppy who was vomiting. So my day got started quite late. So not a typical day, but I will say that there's this morning routine I've been doing, which is this kind of like burdock, dandelion tincture. I guess they call it herbal coffee. And it's like my body just kind of soaks it up, and I look outside and I'm in the woodlands and I just kind of look out at the trees and watch the birds, and a bit of a jumbled start this morning, but always have of late, my herbal coffee concoction. I put some rose drops in it and some medicinal mushrooms, and it's just super nourishing.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah. Especially in the cold, rainy weather,
Yeah, it feels like nourishment.
Mm-hmm.
And you just mentioned about looking out into the woods. So you recently moved to Tennessee.
I did, just over a year ago, about a year and 3 months, and bought this house just about 11 months ago, and loving it. So we're on some acreage, and most of it is wooded, and it is so peaceful. It's been hugely transformative for me, being a city girl previously.
Yeah. I mean, New York and LA, right? So
yes. And in LA, I was like slowly inching my way. By the end of my time in LA, I was out in Topanga. So for, I don't know if your listeners know, but Topanga is up in the mountains right off of the ocean, and it's definitely more nature filled, but you're still right there in LA. I'm about 25 minutes from downtown Nashville, but it's quite rural. And, I think that, and I went to New Zealand for part of the pandemic. I just think that my soul has been slowly bringing me deeper into my own desire to be surrounded and immersed in nature. And so much of Tennessee, it's so so much of near Nashville, it's so beautiful, but it's these rolling hills. And so I love this pocket, which I love, but I love this pocket that we're in because it's so wooded. And so I just look out deep and just woods and woods and woods. And I personally just love that. I'm a tree person. Forest fairy, as they say.
I know. I just love that. And I'm interested to know, you said that, and we will obviously go into the astrology, but I have to have a chat first, obviously. Just, you said it's so transformative, and my dreams, to have always moved kind of towards like the rural East Coast. And and we had a session, and you told me something that has just stuck with me, because you said that my Venus runs through that sort of area, like Tennessee, North Carolina. And I've said to my husband, I always see myself in North Carolina. I've never even been to North Carolina. And you were like, Lauren, your Venus runs through North Carolina and your Pluto runs through England. So can you just explain what you told me, like what that actually means? Because that was mind blowing for me, that, wow, like maybe I've always had this intuition because that's where I'm being guided.
Yeah. So you're talking about astrocartography, and it's where our certain lines run throughout the world. And sometimes we're drawn or feel called to places that are challenging or have can be perceived as a challenging line. For example, if London is your Pluto line, for me, Los Angeles is my Pluto and Uranus line. If anybody were looking at astrocartography, they say you cannot move there. But I actually felt called there during a series of Pluto transits that were ongoing. I said one Pluto transit. And after the third Pluto transit and completion, I was like, oh, I'm ready to go. Like I'm done here. But the Venus line is where many people feel ideally drawn to, because it's pleasure and it's enjoyment and it's beauty and it's femininity and it's attraction. And so there's an ease with the Venus line. And yeah, North Carolina is just absolutely beautiful. And it's someplace we definitely considered, and some of our closest friends actually live out near Asheville. But that whole area is just magical. Is that that's what we were talking about, right?
Yeah.
Like Black Mountain, Asheville,
totally.
Swananoa. Yeah, it's just this whole region, I think, because of essentially the Civil War in America, a lot of it is less developed than the North or even the West. I mean, it's kind of a rudimentary explanation, but it still feels somewhat undiscovered. I know Asheville is kind of known, and obviously now Nashville is blowing up. But the Southeast, the soil feels really rich.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I always said to Daniel. I feel called to the land. And I've said it to so many people, and they're like, what do you mean? I said, I don't really know. I just feel called to the land there. And people are like, what about the politics? And I was like, I don't know. I just feel called. I'm not going to get involved with politics. I just feel called to the land. And also that area, like the Appalachian Mountains, it's all on quartz crystals. It's like really high vibration.
Yeah, I think Arkansas is like one of the highest vibrations in America. Most people don't realize that. And Arkansas is actually, there's a lot of really interesting things happening in Arkansas. But that's how I felt. I came here in 2015, and I went to the Smoky Mountains, which is closer to North Carolina. Actually, the Smoky Mountains also run through there. And 2015, then I came to Nashville with my sister, and I just said, I think I have to move here at some point. And I met my partner, Danielle, in 2017.
I love that we both got Daniels.
Totally. And absolutely. And when I met him, I had said, I think I either want to go to Nashville or Denver. Denver is just, one of my oldest friends lives in Boulder, and my parents are in Colorado. My other sister's in Colorado. My other sister's probably moving to Colorado. So Colorado's deep in my heart. But yeah, with everything that went down with the pandemic, I was like, now's the time. Let's just go. And it just kind of, This is how I feel when this is for me. When I landed in Los Angeles in 2005, I was taken with the magic of it and the kind of the cinematic, and I love film and I love storytelling. And there's something so, dreamy about LA, or was in 2005. And it was a slower pace then. I lived by the water in Santa Monica. It was a slower pace, and it just upped its pace more and more and more. But I will say that Los Angeles never welcomed me in. I felt like I was always kind of, well, maybe I'll try this and maybe I'll try this. And I moved more than once a year, essentially, if you added up all the times I moved. And it just I never found an apartment or a home that felt good to me. And I landed here and bought a house within 3 months. Mm-hmm. So and then kind of tells you everything you need to know. It's like it just, and my Neptune line runs through here. Neptune line is mysticism, spirituality, a softness. There's like a kind of soft haze. And I feel that here. And so I think that we actually know, because when I do ask for cartography, people are like, that's so wild, because I've always been drawn here. It's so wild how we know.
Yeah. Like my Venus doesn't run through China or like Mongolia or somewhere that I've never felt drawn to, And it runs through the one place I've always spoken about. And I just find that so interesting. Okay, so let's talk about kind of astrological projections for 2023. Like, what do we need to look out for? What are the top things we need to know? Let's start there.
Yeah, so I think the massive shifts come pretty much in March, because in March we have 2 very significant events, one of which is that Saturn makes its way into Pisces. So it's been in Aquarius since 2020, and then briefly dipped back into Capricorn and then re-entered Aquarius. And so we've been in this Saturn in Aquarius. It's a lot about lessons around groupthink, lessons around technology, lessons around science. What does that mean? What does progression mean? Big, sweeping political events. In fact, because I love history, I went back the other day. I was, and I'm particularly interested. Well, I'm interested in all kinds of history, but lately I've been really interested in the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917 in Russia. And there was a whole lot of Aquarian energy happening around that time, especially Uranus, which rules Aquarius and is the planet of change making, was in Aquarius during that period. And it's coming off of in World War I, now coming off of. And so it's interesting because I feel like there's a kind of similar thread kind of happening from all different angles globally around the working class kind of rising up from all different angles. And Saturn is in Aquarius and then moves into Pisces, which is all about healing. So I kind of see Saturn in Pisces. It'll be there until 2025. It's kind of like making dreams a reality, lessons around faith, creating a structure around faith. I also wonder if there's going to be more stuff that comes up around religion, clamping down on religion, people turning to religion, all kinds of conversations about religion, which can also be a Sagittarian theme. But there's something, because Pisces is so much about mysticism, I think that there's going to be a lot of kind of conversations about that, but also maybe a clamp down on snake oil, what's seen as snake oil versus like the real thing.
So could we see a huge shift there? Could we be seeing?
I think we could. I think we really could. And then in addition to that, Pluto, which takes 248 years to grow in the zodiac, compare that to Saturn, which takes 28 and a half years. And Pluto cycles are revolutionary cycles. So Pluto makes its way into Aquarius. The last time Pluto was in Aquarius was the French Revolution. Again, that Aquarian theme, right? So I think that we'll have this energy that we've had some lessons around with Saturn in Aquarius really ramp up. And there's all different ways to perceive it, because Pluto is about death and rebirth. So is it the death of the individual? Is it all kinds of conversations around AI and privacy and, these big, big questions, and kind of a global outlook, versus a more nuanced, textured, localized perspective. So I think the themes that we've been seeing are going to ramp up. That's, that's just, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. So I think we're not looking for there's no easy answers to all that's been kicked up. I would say since over the past 4 decades, but specifically, you know how things happen slowly and then all at once, like what we've seen over the past few years. And then, on top of that, Jupiter is in Aries until the spring, then makes its way into Taurus. And Jupiter in Taurus is expansion around the material plane. But what's interesting is that Uranus has been in Taurus, and Uranus is all about change. And they're actually going to meet up in April of 2024, Jupiter and Uranus. But I think there's going to be more kind of volatility in the markets, like what we saw just recently with crypto and what we're seeing with digital currencies and what we're seeing, with inflation. I think 2023 is going to be a wild ride astrologically. And I think also we have Venus. So we start the year with Mars still in retrograde until January 12th. And then at the end, in midsummer, July 22nd, we have Venus retrograde in Leo until September 3rd. And I do wonder, with Uranus and Taurus and these kind of changing beauty standards and Jupiter moving into Taurus and then the Venus retrograde, all of that is very Venusian beauty. And desires what we seem to want. And I do wonder if there's going to be a deeper exploration. We see a rise of all kinds of plastic surgery and alteration to the body, to the face, especially with the rise of social media. And I wonder if there's going to be a conversation around that. I don't even say that without judgment. It's just certainly been on the rise. And I wonder if we're going to have a conversation about that, conversations around beauty standards, how we treat the earth, especially with this Taurus, and the different ways that that's approached, right? There's obviously the more technological pursuit. I'm certainly way more partial to the more regenerative, letting the earth speak, renew itself, philosophy, more the Zach Bush, just like, you are. But I think that we're going to have a lot of increased reevaluation of values. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And that just sounds so needed.
Yeah. Yeah. But again, everything is neutral until directed. I don't take a Pollyanna approach to anything. I think that human nature is very complicated, but I think, those who feel that their priorities are in order, those who feel in integrity, those who feel connected to themselves at the deepest level are going to have fortitude. And sometimes circumstances bring that out often within people. And so people really start to understand, oh, what am I made of? What's my character? How am I built? And I think we've seen a lot of that over the past few years. How do I treat people? So I think we'll see continued unfolding around that, shall we say.
I always think you and I are so similar in so many things. And one of those is just kind of just all this stuff you were talking about like just understanding that everything is nuanced. You can never just say, this is it. It's like this.
100%.
I definitely used to be like that. I think, when social media first came out and I was on my rampage like 15 years ago to, educate the world about holistic healing. And I was like, and then I feel like we were kind of the first generation who got thrust into social media without having any training. And I think, although I absolutely am so scared of my kids being old enough to, access all of that, I also think they have a bit more, like they understand the etiquette of it a bit more than we did.
Yes.
Well, you were probably more guarded than I was because you're definitely better than I am at just kind of not giving all of yourself all the time. And that's been a learned behavior for me.
Yeah.
I think I've had to learn that. But just this thing of like understanding that there is nuance. Nothing in this universe is black and white.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I've always been I think it's probably the Scorpio in my chart. I've always been a bit private. I had to do a lot of work to unleash that. But it's funny you bring that up because I had a dear friend. I have a dear friend, and we met in our late 20s. We actually did a program together, and she's strong Scorpio. And I remember just watching her, like we were in our early 30s, and she would just be like, no, I'm not doing it. Instead, but it wasn't a way that the way I said that sounded harsh, but it was a way of just like, no, this is my priority. And I'm going to make this my priority, and I'm not going to spread myself thin. And she really taught me so much. And I remember even when I was starting out and I was like, oh, I'll just do your reading for you. And she's like, no, I'm paying you for your time. And she taught me so much around boundaries, again, which are nuanced because it's a constant negotiation. But I really learned from her because I was a person who, my boyfriend, the guy I was with, I don't even know what you call it. When I was younger, he would be like, you're just on the phone all day, like taking care of everybody else. And I think later I was like, oh, I should make a career out of this.
Yeah,
because I'm doing
same
this.
Same thing happened with me. Yeah, I did it for free for so long.
Yeah, this is what I'm doing. I'm just, counseling everybody. But yeah, I do think that we were thrust into it into all kinds of ways that we've had to learn. And I think that I actually I went in my healing process, when I did my master's, I went off social media for about 3 or 4 years. And by the time I came back, I didn't really ever rejoin Facebook. I think I joined, but not really. And I'm off it completely. But I was kind of late to Instagram. And, I am definitely aware, I think like back to those years where I was in this cocoon and not on it. And I'm so grateful I made that choice. And I think we all kind of have a love-hate relationship with Instagram because it's so helpful in terms of getting our work out there and sharing who we are. But then it's this, just black hole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I do think that this, what we're seeing in 2023 astrologically is going to bring up big questions about it. But at the same time, it's like social media exposes things. Like we wouldn't know what's happening in Iran, would we?
Right.
Or we wouldn't know the protests that are starting up in a big way in China right now.
Although that's kind of, that's really got my back up because we just heard it. I don't listen to or watch the news, but we were in the car and the radio was on and they were talking about it, and it just kind of pissed me off because the English news are reporting it, but when we were protesting here, they weren't reporting it, right?
Yeah.
So because it didn't suit the agenda at the time. So it's kind of annoyed me that they're talking about that happening in China, like it makes a difference to us,
Well, I think it's just the idea, journalism in these Western nations journalistic integrity is gone. Everything has an agenda. So let's keep your eye over there and on that, although some of that's very important and necessary to know, like the genocide that's happening in China, right? But let's keep our eye over there versus on us because we failed.
Right.
We fail and we continue to fail, right? Journalists. And so there are incredible journalists who are doing real work. And thank God for them. But I do think that's another thing that we're going to continue to have conversations about because, people like to think back to other eras like, oh my God, how did propaganda spread? Like, how'd that happen? And now it's like we've weaponized propaganda the same way with the invention of the printing press, right? In 1492, and then the flyers, and then people can read and oh my God, this must be truth because I can read it. Same thing. And I just think that the continued reckoning around tech is really coming to a head. And we're seeing that at the big tech companies, but I think we're really going to see it with Pluto and Aquarius. And, the universe is always expanding, right? So that's that's true, right? But at the same time, when we think of the natural world, contraction is necessary for expansion, right? If you birth a baby, you need to contract and expand in order to push the baby out, right? So I kind of see, I am not a pie in the sky thinker, right? I tend to be a pragmatist in some ways. And so I'm not Pollyanna, like I said, about like there being a giant wake up and everybody just like waking up in consciousness. I think it's going to be, it's very slow, but I think that the contraction, it's like we have this idea of contraction, recession, all these things are terrible, but they're necessary because we look around at these, multinational corporations and this technology, these companies, it's like everything's so bloated. Like the valuations are out of step. And it's like, I just think it's a necessary thing that we come back down to the groundedness of like, what's real, what's necessary. I have a very chop wood, carry water approach to enlightenment.
Yeah, you do. And this is something I love about you, though. You are one of very few people that I know who you don't take a Pollyanna approach, but you have ways of thinking of things that you'll say something to me and I'll be like, I didn't think of it like that. Like not trying to be devil's advocate. You just have this way of thinking of things. You never put yourself in, this is my belief, and regardless, I'm going to fight to the death for that. You look at every side, not in order to try and be devil's advocate. You just have this way of, and maybe that's the astrologer in you, maybe it's the psychologist in you, maybe it's
the
just
Jewish doubt, the critical thinking. I think it's a big part of that. Like the doubt, the critical thinking, the always questioning. But I have to say that it's been a real reckoning for me over the past few years, because I definitely, this sounds so silly, but I was really informed growing up so I was a teenager. I turned 10 in 1990, and I grew up in the Clinton era, and I grew up in, when I was 19, The West Wing came out, this show in America that really kind of romanticized, great, right? Romanticized, Washington. And I had certainly people go into, now, they didn't always, but people go into government for all the right reasons, and people in power are there. And that was so out of step if I think about it with the rest of my thinking. But that show, and Aaron Sorkin and his stunning writing, like, it's like people say it's Shakespearean, but it actually wasn't Shakespearean, because Shakespeare is tragic. So much, comic, but also tragic. And I really think that I had a real reckoning around all of these, and I know I'm not alone in this, but all of these institutions that I had held as sacred, the New York Times, Ivy League institutions, the halls of, the corridors of Congress. And, I was very romanticized about it all, very like, look at this great idea and this great American experiment, and look at it. And I do think the late 90s, early 2000s were peak Western civilization in a lot of ways. I do. And so I came up in that, but it's been a real reckoning and really incredibly disorienting. And I don't think I'm alone. And I think that has a lot to do, starting with 2016 and the Saturn-Neptune square, that we had, which was that whole fake news, what's real. Saturn is reality, physical world reality, things that are tactile. And Neptune is mysticism, but it's also the veil. So what's real? And so I think the fallout really since 2016, and I don't think I'm alone in this. I think there's a lot of people who are questioning. And I think a lot of people, at least here in America, I really believe that most people are somewhere in the middle and just want to be able to eat healthy food, drink clean water, be able to go to a park with their kids, have their kids at a school that they know they're being educated at. Like, I think most people are grounded somewhere. And I think between the bots and the algorithm and the rage, it's like exposing the worst of us. But I do think that there is, with this astrology, some real big questions that are going to continue to unfold.
If you haven't yet heard, I have just released a free, yes, free journaling course. If you've always wanted to try journaling but just don't know where to start, or you've been hearing how powerful journaling can be but you just don't understand why, or you want to create a daily practice that enhances your life but you just need a little support in doing that without it costing you anything, this course will do all that for you. It is packed with content that will show you just why journaling is important, how to do it, where to start, and how to make it work for you. It is completely free, and that is as a way for me to pay it forward, because journaling really is one of the most integral parts of my growth practice, and I want to give that to you. All you have to do is click on the link in the show notes to get the course sent directly to your inbox. And you mentioned plastic surgery, and that's interesting because I see that already. So I recently had an explant. I don't know if I told you, yeah. And I am hearing of lots of other women who have done it as well. Now, I only had them in the first place for medical reasons, because I was on chemo that messed up my breasts when I was still developing. Not that I've ever had any judgment around anyone that did it for cosmetic reasons, but now my view on it, I'm always health first, like well-being first, right? Even like when I have the conversation with, friends or family that are also Jewish, and they're asking about the way kind of my husband and I, like my family, do Judaism or do, it's always health first, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm not going to eat meat personally, because I'm not, I'm going to go for the healthiest option.
Yes.
So it's always health first. So now that I'm seeing it from this health perspective, it's not a judgment, but it's another thing of informed choice. It's another thing about informed consent that people just don't know. And I'm actually doing an episode on this in the new year with my friend Rain, who I've done a few episodes with. And because she also recently went through an explant, and she's really been researching it. And there's this whole community of women suffering horrific health problems because of their breast implants. And it's only now, because we're having the conversation about the fact that these things might be toxic and might be leaching toxins into your system, that all these women who are suffering these health conditions and thinking, oh, I just have an autoimmune disease. And as I've always said, autoimmune diseases don't just fall out of the sky. Everything has, like when I was diagnosed at the age of 2, it was called juvenile idiopathic arthritis, and idiopathic means no defined cause. And I always say everything has a defined cause, maybe not defined, always slightly nuanced, but there is a cause, right? So I think that it's interesting what you're saying, that I think these conversations are starting to happen already. I'm even seeing this shift that I've seen on Instagram. Apparently the Kardashians now don't want their big curves. Apparently they're trying to be smaller. So there's all these...
But also are injecting themselves with drugs to do that. That's not a natural, slow release.
Right.
And I think that, I've never gotten filler or Botox or anything, mostly because I was raised by parents who were quite, my mom, I never actually saw my mom wear makeup, and I was just raised to be very natural in that way. My mom always had her hair done, always had her nails done, always looked actually quite put together, but just no makeup. And I just wasn't raised, seeing that. But I do play around with makeup, but I've never gotten Botox or filler. But the number one reason I've never done it is because I'm like, what's in that?
Yeah, same. Like we just don't know yet.
Yeah. And I also I see these older women who are aging naturally, and I just think they are luminescent. And so that's my personal goal. But we don't know. I mean, I've always been like that. Like what's in this? Like what, when I was a little girl and I would eat gummies, my mom would say like, what? My mom was not health conscious in like the classic way, but she's like, what is that? That's not food.
Common sense, right? Like common sense, putting something in your body that you don't really know what it is. And I think all these things, it's like when I talk to other women who are mothers who are thinking about, decisions to make with their children. And I always love the mothers who are like, they're not necessarily in the world that I'm in, of like, people will call me quite extreme in the way that I parent and the way I live my life, when it comes to health. They're not like that, but they're just like, oh, I don't know why I breastfeed. It just makes sense. Like she's not reading it from a book. She doesn't have a manual. No one told her, hey, read this book and then you'll know how to be a parent. She's just like, oh, I got boobs and they produce milk, so that must be like a good thing for my baby. And And also, like,
Yeah.
if I don't have to have a cesarean, like maybe my body just know, like my mum always says this. My mum never even had, so I'm the type of person that's like, right, I'm going to go and I'm going to prepare for birth and I'm going to do the hypnobirthing and I'm going to do this, and great, like it was great for me. But my mum is the opposite of me, and she's like, oh, I didn't even think that birth would be hard, so I just went and I did it and it was fine. I didn't have any, like, that's my mum, right?
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
it was made sense to her. Like, I'm having a
Yes.
baby, and apparently women have done this forever, and so it should be, as opposed to like the panic and the fear, and so I never had that from my mum, of like all that fear about childbirth, and I'm so grateful for that.
Well, that's really interesting because that ties back into what I'm talking about, Taurus also, and like
My mum's a Taurus.
listening to the body. Is she? Listening to the body, just like paying attention to the body. It's like, what is my body trying to communicate to me? It's like we're so up here in our heads, and it's like even I have a naturally pretty curvy body. I've been smaller at different points. After my accident, I ballooned because of the trauma to my body after my car accident, my near-death experience. But now it's finding its way back. But I've never been like a hard driving. I was anorexic when I was 14 and recovered from that. But since recovering, I've just kind of been like, this is my body. Like, I want to feed it nourishing foods. I know other people can't have dairy. I like A2 Jersey milk dairy. I'm very clean about it. Like, I was taught by this woman, Nina Plank. I met her. She was older than me, and I met her. She ran the farmers markets in New York City, and she grew up on a farm, and Whole Foods, like not Whole Foods, the store, like genuine Whole Foods. Like, this is how meat should be raised. This is how it should be killed. This is like whole butter. It's real. It's like full of vitamins. And I think also I studied abroad in Florence, Italy in college. And so it was around all that same time. And anytime I veered from that and I did like the LA kale, constant juicing, I didn't do well. I didn't have energy. My body didn't respond well. And so it's like, oh, well, why don't I just pay attention to how we've been eating for millennia and what my ancestral body wants? And I'm supposed to have hips. That's my body.
Right. Yeah.
And like, I really have come to a real grounding around that. And I really enjoy being here in Tennessee because I feel like, well, there's a lot of regenerative farms everywhere, which was important to me, but I just don't feel like the conversation is about weight. Whereas like in LA and New York, I feel like it was constant. And I don't think I've had one conversation about weight here.
Oh, it's blissful.
Truly.
Yeah.
It's like, just go out, enjoy your life, and you live you and I live me. But I think that I really try and listen to my body. Like if I wake up and I'm like, you know what, I actually just want some sourdough toast and some butter, I have that. If I wake up and I'm like, oh, I'm really craving eggs, I have that. If I'm craving porridge, I have that. Like I try to listen to see like what nutrients is my body craving right now.
Right. Interoception. It's something we've lost, that knowing, that inner knowing of our body, like knowing days before you're going to get sick, all of that. And what you were saying about social media kind of being that we either love it or hate it. One thing I have absolutely gained from social media is community around those things. So the body positive movement, like you can immerse yourself. And back in the day I followed like the Victoria's Secret models and the this and the that. And then I completely recurated my feed and what I was seeing. And I think you can be immersed in that world, and friends that I have who do suffer with body image challenges, I'm like, no, you need to be on Instagram and follow these people, because actually when you're immersed in that world and that's what you're seeing, that actually shifts your mindset, because you're like, she's doing this, it looks great, she's happy with herself. Whereas when you're just in the real world, IRL, and you're just kind of in that world of like everyone kind of is watching their weight and talking to you about it, that matters to you more. So I do think you can totally curate what you want to see. That actually does change your mindset.
Because if you're constantly fed images, like I'm, I think Kate Winslet is so beautiful as an example, right? And she has this like beautiful, but, and it's like, she did this incredible show called Mayor of Easttown, and there was a scene where she was like half naked, and I was like, if you just see this more, like you see it as beautiful. It's like paintings from other eras where there was more curves, but I like the whole spectrum of it. I think it's all beautiful, but when you're only shown one thing and then you get dressed and you're like, well, I don't look like this.
Right. And you know what I saw today? As you know, I took the kids to see Frozen in the West End, and I was expecting, because my brain's been conditioned like that because I grew up in the 90s, which was, I think, the most dangerous time for young women.
Yes, heroin chic.
Oh my God.
I was anorexic. Yeah, I get it. It's intense.
Yeah, same. It was horrific for me. And I truly think I'm still healing from that, like genuinely. But so there was Elsa, who was, you know, white and blonde and slim, but the Anna came out and she was a curvy Black woman. And I was like, oh, they've done this. Like, you know, and my kids they're like, they didn't ask me anything like that. They see more diversity than I ever did. Right. So I was like, this is so cool. They're not Anna didn't need to be the same size clothes as Elsa, and she's still doing all the dances and being lifted by the men and the rest of it. And I was so like, my heart was warmed by that today.
It's part of the real beauty of, you know, the conversation. And I think it's like knowing your body. I just come back to nourishment. And when one is constantly trying to drop weight, the mentality around that is rarely around nourishing.
Right.
It's around denial. And
totally.
I just, maybe it's all the earth in my chart. I need to be able to like have a pasta if I'm in Italy, or like I'm at a great Italian restaurant, you know, I need to be able to feel like there's pleasure and there's enjoyment. And because I live that way, you know, I'm not like, oh my God, I have to scramble and I know there's all kinds of disordered eating for all kinds of ways. And my thing was definitely more control. But I just think when we listen to our body, but I was with a group of girls and, a group of women, I should say. And we were all getting lattes, and the waitress brought the lattes, and it was like oat milk latte, almond milk latte. And she brought mine, and it was just a latte. And one of the women was like, oh no, she didn't order that. And I was like, yes, I did.
Yeah, that assumption. You wouldn't dare consider cow's milk.
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
It's just funny how the default is like, oh, that's not, but you know, a little bit of dairy for me, I'm not lactose intolerant. I can stomach it, but also do well with it.
Right. Yeah. Like you say, the ancestral thing. I talk about that a lot. I talk about the answer, you know, I feel like our bodies have all evolved. We've gone on such a tangent, but anyway, yes. Our bodies have evolved to like require what our ancestors had, because that is how we evolved. That's evolution. So like I see my Indian friends totally thriving on a vegetarian or vegan diet.
Right.
That didn't work for me. You know, I wanted it to because that, you know, fit the brand and, you know, it made me feel good, like ethically, but actually now I've learned more about it and I've been able to really go into that kind of world of sustainable meat eating, where I believe like if everyone who ate meat did that and ate meat from like local organic farms that regenerate their soil and everything twice a week or whatever, you know, then like the world would be a different place. But anyway, here we are.
We're in the same. But I think these kind of conversations, and I think there'll be continued kind of shakeups of the status quo, and it's going to come from all different angles. And I think the other thing that feels very much on trend with Pluto in Aquarius is, sound extreme, we've had this kind of death of celebrity that's happening, right? It's like, because someone will be put on a pedestal and then that person is exposed in and then drop down, which has been happening since the beginning of time. The whole Aquarius, which is like the collective, and also like all these niche celebrities, like you know, I'm old, but like there's no, like,
you're not old.
But I mean, like, I don't know, like there's like TikTok stars that have like millions of followers.
Right.
I don't know their name. They're like 18 or 15 or whatever. But there's this, and this has been happening with social media, right? And theoretically what was democratized media, but now that's no longer the case with censorship, et cetera, and algorithms. But it seems to me like who we put up on a pedestal and everybody having their niche person. Whereas like, think about the 80s, it was like Tom Cruise and, Julia Roberts. And we don't see that level of star power.
Yeah, so true. Yeah.
And
maybe because there's just so many of them now.
That's exactly it. It's like, and so many different niche, right? Like I always think when I was in LA, I was like, I feel like I'm passing people all the time that I have no idea who they are, but like my niece might know who they are. Or, I think that there's so much content out there coming from so many different angles. So that breakdown has all kinds of effects. And some of that is probably quite good and quite healthy because there's not a singular idea, but the flip side of that is that, everyone saw E.T.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is a kind of shared collective experience. And also I think there was, at least in the 80s, it felt like there was, and 90s, that film and media study it a lot. And especially through the lens of astrology, it feels like there were the kind of moral lessons, these ideas, like you should have character, you should have dignity, you should do the right thing. And the rise of the anti-hero and the breakdown of that has led also to this kind of extreme pessimism. And I don't know, there's a part of me that would love, with Saturn moving into Pisces, of maybe bringing back a bit more faith, a bit more of content that feels heart-centered and soul-centered.
Yeah, totally. I'm
as
interested.
Opposed to like destructive and dystopian,
Yeah, which is exactly how it's felt for the last few years. I'm interested to know how this reflects, or how it affects manifestation. So this has been something I've always wondered. If something is happening astrologically, like all these shifts you're talking about, changes in the financial market, for example, that can be affected astrologically, are we still able, if we've got this, I believe there is a formula to manifestation, and if you've kind of got the facets of it down, you can manifest. Would anything shifts, like astrological shifts, change that? Or can you stay in your power with manifestation and still pull those manifestations in?
Well, that's a great question. And I don't know that I have an easy answer for that. I do think that it's complicated because I think that one can manifest, but I also think value. And so when value shift is collective, what the collective desires shift. So that deals with trends, and trends in the collective then can speak to financial, let's say, success or abundance, right? If a resource is scarce, if you're talking about the market. But if you're just talking about the core ability to manifest, I believe there is a formula up until the soul has a lesson it needs to learn. And the soul needing to learn a lesson will always override anything that the conscious mind thinks that it desires. And so
that, yeah.
It's a layered thing. So I think about this a lot in terms of like horrific moments in history, like why, you take genocide. Why was one family able to escape during the Holocaust and another one wasn't? Was it because in their mind they felt that they manifested escaping? No, I don't think so. I think there is a soul thing and a soul contract that's a cosmic thing way beyond our mortal understanding. So it kind of goes back to that. I think the tricky thing about manifestation, that like, why do bad things happen to good people? It's like, so, but when you're talking about synchronicity and magic, and I think when you're living like that, I do believe in that formula, but I do believe that the soul, and it does, I don't mean bad things happen, like the soul need, but the soul may need to make more than one anticipated in order to learn a certain lesson. The soul may need to make less in order to learn a certain lesson, because the story is long. And often manifestation, the impulse comes from ego and desire. And the real key is to get underneath to have one's desires in alignment with the soul path.
Ugh, just that whole blurb. Just going to cut that out and like put that everywhere.
But do you see, do you connect with that, what I'm saying? Because I think
like
that there's
more than you can even know, like especially from my own journey, you know, I've had a lot of, you know, pain, physical pain in my life. And that's been my theme, even when I've kind of gone into remission from the arthritis, and then other things have cropped up, this recent jaw thing. And like, it's always been a theme of physical pain. Done a lot of ancestral healing, a lot of past life healing. So trying to like, I think there's also this element of breaking patterns, breaking
100%
patterns and past life patterns and all of that. And then up until a certain point, again, then the soul still needs to learn. And for me, my most recent lesson has been in surrender. I'm going through the journey work at the moment, you know, the Brandon Bayes journey. And that's been just a beautiful another layer of kind of, you know, moving more deeply into the spiritual work, you know, like working with my shaman and having kind of that side of really deep kind of dream time work, and then doing this journey work. And it's been about surrender. Like, I mean, it goes so deep, right? But just the surrender of knowing that some things are out of our control because they have to happen. And yet I do still firmly believe, and like you say, like, again, this is why, like, I love our conversations. Everything's so nuanced. I believe we can manifest. I do. I believe there's a formula to manifestation. I believe that I've manifested so much in my life that at one point I just would, if I looked back, if I was me that at 17 looking at me now at 38, I would have been like, what? Shut up. Like, you know,
100%. And there's probably a lot of surprises
pain.
Along the way.
So many surprises, like, you know, and still there has been pain, and there's been, you know, other crap. But every time I come out of it, you know, you feel, you just have that intuitive understanding that I needed that lesson. When you're in it, you don't want it anymore, but
but you need it. And that's the learning about the contraction that I was talking about earlier. And so I think, yeah, it's a complicated, layered thing. And I think that often when we're like, I need this thing, I need this thing, I need this thing.
Right.
Why? Why? And it's the work underneath of why. And I think it's also like, I for so many years wanted a home in Los Angeles, never happened. And like I said, finally got out of my own way and like listened to my soul's call and was able to buy a house within 3 months in Tennessee that feels beautiful and like home. And so, well, one argument could be that I was in my own way of my own manifestation because I wanted it there.
Right.
Instead of...
And your higher self knew it wasn't meant to be there. So it wasn't allowing you to manifest that home.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And
so
that makes so much sense.
And so the surrendered perspective, which is really the only way my life has ever flowed. Like I know other people, they've got a ton of fire in their chart or whatever, and they're like, they go for it and they go for it and they promote and they hustle. Like that is not my style. I need to invite in. I tried it. I just tried it again. And I'm like, it doesn't work for me. No. That's not.
Is that part of your astrological sign as well?
I think so. Because I have a lot of feminine energy in my chart, which is about like receiving. And I know because when I'm doing that, when I'm trying to sell something, it feels, rather than inviting someone into an experience with me, it feels different in my body. It feels out of alignment. that's not out of alignment for another person, but for me, it's out of alignment. And that's listening to the body. Right. And so that is when I'm working with people, I'm really saying like, what feels like, what lights you up? And what lights me up is actually like a more simple word of mouth approach for me.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I agree.
And so I just had to listen to that. And so, but it's all, that's the other thing. I said this recently and I really believe it. I think that this idea that like, you know, you can get your chart read or your human design chart read or, you know, any kind of predictive tool or psychological tools for understanding, or it's Myers-Briggs or something. And then you know that, and the world just lays out like a red carpet. It just doesn't work like that, because we discover who we are through experience. We discover those nuanced pieces of ourselves that are evident in all the charts, but we only really discover them by living, by falling down, getting back up, making mistakes. You know, David White, in one of his talks, beautiful thing, this poet, and he says, you know, part of life is thinking you're doing the right thing and actually doing the wrong thing, and thinking you're doing the wrong thing and actually doing the right thing, and rubbing up against life. I'm paraphrasing, but it's like, we discover who we are through the experiences. The knowledge is a great tool, but the real guidance comes in paying attention. What happens when I'm in this situation? How do I behave? What's my default? What's the actual application of it? And I just think so much of astrology, and the memes are funny, but it's just become this like, oh, I'm this, therefore I'm done. No, no, you're not cooked.
Right. And it's also comes down to, for me, like the neuroplasticity aspect has always been a big thing for me, because I am a big fan of human design and Myers-Briggs and all these things. And actually some of them have helped me to go, yes, oh, okay, I get that that's me. Great. Yep. But, and again, like the nuance, right?
Yeah.
But, or also, and, because, you know, instead of the but, we can change that, right? Because we're not hardwired. Our brains are not hardwired. There is software. We download, you know, our information and conditioning from around us, and we can change that, right? And then we get to change that based on these experiences that you're talking about. And I'm a different person, even in my intrinsic character, to who I was 20 years ago. Like I was naturally, when people who know me now, who have been my friend in the last 10 years or 5 years or whatever, and I say about how angry I used to be, and they're like, no, like, you're not an angry person. I was like, no, you don't even know. Like, first thing my mum did when, you know, I grew up with an illness. I should have been in therapy way before 18, but at 18, when I was going through like my hardest time, all that shit kind of blew up, and I'd been on the chemo. I came off it. I was disabled. My mum was like, you need anger management. Now, she, you know, she should have said you need to go to a psychologist, but whatever, that was her understanding. She didn't know. She's from that generation of, you know, just talk to your friends and you'll be all right. But like, I was literally in anger management, and that was the first thing people thought I needed, because I was so angry. And yet people who know me now would be like, you're not an angry person. I have literally trained myself out of that. So yes, my Myers-Briggs might say something, or my human design, or my astrology, or whatever, but equally, like, I do have the ability to continue improving myself and becoming better.
That's it. That's the key. Because when we give that up, we give away our own power, and we also, you know, the work never ends. And the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow is the inner peace. Mm-hmm. Everything else is the gravy, right? It's like when we shift into a way of being that feels more in alignment, that's when, I mean, that's where the manifestation stuff, I think, really works. That piece of it, and it has a lot to do with getting out of our own way.
Mm-hmm. And also not trying to manifest, like, oh, because that puts the resistance in it. What we resist persists. It doesn't work.
Exactly. That's that trust piece, the surrendered perspective.
My last question for you is, I heard something, and I've been meaning to ask you this, and I'm glad I can ask you on the podcast. I heard from someone that just said to me that our star signs are actually not accurate anymore because the planets have moved
Oh yeah.
since they
This
were
comes up. This is like a cycling thing that like comes up all the time. Yeah, I mean, I think that it's an ancient art since ancient Babylonia. It's right. You know what I mean? It's as right, like archetypally, it's right. It's just that there's this other, I think it's called like Oculus or something, like, but I don't know. I think the cosmic download is so much deeper around it all. So yes, I believe your star sign is what it was.
Because someone said to me, no, so you're not Pisces, you're an Aries. I was like, I am Pisces,
Yeah.
like through and through.
You are so Pisces. Yeah, I think that it comes up a lot because NASA found something, and yeah, I don't have a scientific proof response to it other than I think it's a cosmic download that's much deeper than, the scientific.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I'm so happy to have got your perspective on that. Okay, so just going to go into all about you, my rapid fire round, because I love it and it's fun. Okay. Which zodiac sign is your favorite?
Oh, I don't have a favorite. That's like saying, do you have a favorite child?
I don't know. I just thought maybe you'd say like, I really resonate with people who are such and such sign.
Well, I will say that
Pisces, obviously.
I do love Pisces. But I would say that most of my closest friends just happen to be either a Scorpio or have very strong Scorpio in their chart. I just, that's been forever in my life. Yeah. But not my favorite, just that happens to be.
Okay. Can you just inspire us all by telling us what has changed about you or what you've learned about yourself that only came with moving to the country?
How much I desire stillness. I just went back to New York City where I was raised for a week and was running around, and walking 8 miles a day, literally pounding the pavement, as they say, right? And I love theater. I love museums. I did all of that. But I just really am a different phase of my life where I find so much peace in the stillness and being able to watch the birds and put my feet in the soft earth. And I am not inspired personally by cities in quite the way that I used to be. I mean, I'm planning to go to Europe, to Paris in May as a sister's trip. And I haven't been since I was 14, actually, for all the travel I've done.
Please tell me you're going to come to London. I
actually might come to London because literally one of my oldest friends who has 4 sons lives in London. And I actually told her that I think I'm going to come so I haven't seen her or the boys. So I actually think I am going to pop over to London. I'll keep you posted on that. And I want to go to the English countryside. But I really am craving. And that is a market shift. Like when I would travel, I wanted to go to every city imaginable, but slow and then all at once, really, really, really just want to be immersed in nature. I'm doing a retreat in Costa Rica. It's like all about the senses and just, it's changed me. It's changed my values, my desires. I also feel like simplicity. I feel like I really cook most meals at home. I should say Daniel cooks. He's really a very talented cook. We do go out maybe once a week for dinner, and that's really nice. We go into town, but it's more for the atmosphere and feeling like we're connected to the community. But I really love the simplicity of country living, slow mornings. Yeah, it's really changed me. And it's really changed my nervous system.
I can imagine.
Yeah, like in a way that I couldn't have even foresaw.
Yeah.
Not rapid fire, but there's my response.
That's fine. I'm aware that you and I together are never going to do anything rapidly.
Oh, good.
It's all good. We've got time. Yeah, I just feel just with every passing year the same. I'm being called to that stillness, to that, even within my work, like, having had that kind of, I think, coming from growing up sick, wanting to always strive to be normal and to be better, having that ambition, and now just like this past year especially, really lacking, not in a bad way, but like, because lacking sounds like a bad word, but lacking that level of ambition. I'm just like,
right there with
I
you.
want to be with my family. I want to like, move to the country, hopefully in America, on your ranch, on the next ranch, the next door ranch, and just slow the hell down. I totally do. Okay, next one. Last time we did an episode together, I asked you about a book that changed your life, and obviously you said the same book as mine, which is A Little Life, which we both love.
Yeah, it's coming to theater. It's coming to the West End.
Shut up.
She just announced it in 2023. Yeah, maybe we'll pop over and see it if it's there in May.
We have to see that together
when it opens, but yeah.
And I just saw Aaron Sorkin's To Kill a Mockingbird here as well a few weeks ago.
I saw that. It's beautiful.
Yeah,
it's a beautiful. Yeah.
So I just wonder, have you read anything in the last year that's really inspired you?
Oh yeah, I read the best books that I've read so far this year have been Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin.
How do I not know about this?
Great novel. And Lessons by Ian McEwan.
Okay.
I just read those almost back to back, and I just started Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver, which I'm loving. I just haven't had a chance to dive really in, but yeah, I love Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. A Little Life was literally life-changing. This book isn't, but it's so fantastic and wonderful, and I loved it so much. But I would say, oh no, I read it before, I think, our last podcast. But another truly life-changing book by Colin McCann.
Which one? I think it cut out the Paragon.
A Paragon, which is it's a shape with infinite sides, and it's about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and it's told in ellipses. So I think 1,001 ellipses, like these small vignettes. And it should have won the Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, it's such a brilliant, it can't even really be called a novel, but it's based on these two men who both lost their children to the conflict, and one from one side and one from the other side, and how they've come together as friends and actually started, I'm going to get emotional, work on peace building. But it's an extraordinary work. And it just shows the infinite sides to it. I can't believe it didn't get more attention. It is an astounding work by an Irishman, an incredible Irish novelist. Yeah. It is a life-changing book, I think.
Okay. I'm definitely going to have to read that. As you know, Israel is my homeland, and complicated and difficult and challenging. Okay, last one. What's your, I mean, I think you've kind of told us this just through what you're experiencing now, but what's your favorite way to treat yourself? Because, just to give women this, I guess, the permission to slow down and have that level of self-care. What's your favorite way to do that?
I love my baths.
Yeah, me too.
I love my baths. And other than that, slow mornings on my porch with my pups. And yeah, it's a beautiful life here. And being 42, and my life did not go the way I had anticipated. A lot of twists and turns, and it's far from over, knock on wood. But I'm really grateful for this chapter, because it just felt really, really challenging for a really long time. And I just, the gratitude I feel is real and deep. And a lot of that has just come with layers and layers of letting go of what I thought my life should look like, of where I thought I should be, who I thought I should be, and just being. And genuinely grateful for the journey. It didn't happen overnight. And, grateful to be above ground.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's just, especially because of my near-death experience, I just,
I think that's been
small
the
moments.
theme. Yeah, totally. I think that's been the theme for this episode, the letting go, right? Surrender. Thank you.
It's it. Oh, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. I will put all your details in the show notes as always, but it's
Thank you.
DanielleBeinstein.com, right?
Yep.
And you're on Instagram.
Yeah.
And go and check her out. She does amazing astrology sessions. And I'm so excited for everyone to kind of hear this to prepare for the new year. So thank you, my love.
Oh my God, thank you so much for having me. And I'm sorry we had to postpone it because of the flu, but I actually think divine timing, meant to be.
Always. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Reconditioned. I am honestly so grateful to each and every person that tunes in. Thank you also for taking responsibility for your own well-being. You should know that just by choosing to listen to podcasts like this that further your well-being, you're moving more deeply into abundance consciousness. Now, don't forget, I have a bunch of free resources over at laurenvakneen.co.uk, as well as every recommendation you could ever need in regards to your well-being on the LV Recommends page, all categorized for your ease. Thank you also to our sponsors. These episodes would not be possible without them, so make sure to check them out and get some pretty awesome discounts on the show notes. And of course, make sure you're subscribed to the podcast so that you can get updated each time a new one is released. Thank you. I appreciate you. Reconditioned is proud to be working with Women for Women International, a charity that supports women survivors of war in 8 war-torn countries around the world. You can help a woman survivor of war transform her life today by visiting womenforwomen.org.uk/donate.